Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week community chat. For today's chat, we're going to be talking about supportive services and how they are an important part of keeping someone housed after they have experienced homelessness. I forgot to mention that my name is Becks Heyhoe, and I am the Executive Director for United to End Homelessness, and welcome to our chat today. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by three remarkable people who do this work day in and day out, and so I'd like to welcome them and just ask them to share just briefly about who they are and what their organization does. So Karen, I'll turn to you first. Who are you?
Hi, I am Karen Hay. I am a housing stabilization coordinator for the Friendship Shelter. The Friendship Shelter is a nonprofit whose ultimate goal is to end homelessness by providing year-round shelter to homeless adults and focuses many of their efforts on finding appropriate permanent housing solutions for our community's homeless individuals.
Thanks so much, Karen. Jay, I'll turn to you next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Shay Sorrells, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at Orangewood Foundation, and we primarily serve transitional age youth or youth ages 18 to 24. Specifically, we have transitional housing as well as helping with securing housing, resources around it, and supportive services once housing is achieved. And that's the services we provide across Orange County to any youth in that age range.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shay. And David, we'll turn to you next.
Thanks, Bex. Thanks for having me. I'm David Glanders. I'm the Executive Director at Pathways of Hope. Pathways of Hope has been providing comprehensive services around housing security or housing insecurity and food insecurity in North Orange County for the last 45 years. And we have everything from shelter-based modeling to permanent housing to food distribution and just about everything in between. And we're also members of the Family Solutions Collaborative and operate a hub where folks who are homeless can walk in and receive services. So thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
That's great. Thanks so much, David. So we're going to dive straight into a conversation around stability and what that looks like after somebody's homelessness has ended. What does it look like to help them as they become more stable? And so, David, I'm going to turn to you first to talk about housing first and how that relates to our conversation around stability. The people who tuned in may not know what housing first is and what the role that plays in this concept. So I'd love for you to give us some insights on that.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to do it. So housing first is really a philosophy or a concept more than it is, say, a program model or a type of intervention for someone who's homeless or experiencing homelessness. And it's a broad-based philosophy that really works for anybody who's currently homeless or experiencing homelessness, whether it is frequent and has a high level of chronicity, or whether it's someone who's just experiencing it on a temporary or more rare basis. Essentially, the idea is that without housing, you cannot solve any other issues for somebody who is vulnerable and on the streets or seeing, recurring bouts of homelessness. And so, provided that somebody has the stability of housing, they're really allowed to work on other issues that could accompany a situation or a person's profile of different barriers and obstacles that they're having. So, for instance, what I always like to do is talk about the person that you see maybe on the streets as you're kind of moving through your community who looks like they might be struggling with maybe a mental health episode or having some other physical health problems. I always encourage people to stop and think about the difficulty and the challenge of trying to take on those issues while you're actually living on the streets, where homelessness is essentially a full-time job of survival for most people that are homeless, and try to couple that with trying to take on challenging issues, physical health, mental health, substance abuse, all of these kinds of things, while you're also not housed. And if you think about how that would compound that challenge and make it that much more difficult, it's easy to understand that housing coming before those things allows someone for the stability, the ability to work on those issues. I've talked a lot about this with years of doing this work and at conferences and all kinds of stuff. And the one thing I always relate to this is when people think about the community they live in, and people think about their neighbors and who they're surrounded with, folks that are housed, and think about when they receive a challenge, right? So this is kind of on the other end of the spectrum I was just talking about. It is much easier to deal with that. when they are housed. So someone who has physical ailments or something that can see a doctor and know they have a place to go home at night, it just makes it that much easier for them to work through those issues. So Housing First is really about the idea that we take somebody who's homeless, experiencing homelessness, and we first focus on how do we stabilize you to the point where you can then work on these other issues. I could go, there's not enough time today to go into the litany of economic reasons why this makes sense. And being that homelessness is mostly an issue driven by economics, the idea of the cost savings that can be involved by embracing a housing first philosophy and getting people off the streets and allowing them to work through their issues in the stability of their own home makes a lot of sense. Again, not enough time to discuss all that today. United Way has done a great job in doing research with that along with UCI, and yeah, that's kind of just a brief summary of what Housing First really kind of is as a philosophy.
Great, thanks so much, David. And if anybody is interested in learning more around Housing First or some of the cost savings that come with that, we'd really encourage you to attend one of our Homelessness 101 classes where we talk about that and the financial impact, the remarkable financial savings that can be found when we use a Housing First philosophy to address homelessness. And I think, as David mentioned, one of the things just is so important to know about Housing First, that it isn't about putting somebody into a home and then leaving them. It really is this combination of housing and support services. So Karen, I'd love for you to share with us, what do support services look like for somebody that has moved into their own permanent housing?
Yeah, well, supportive services are going to look different for each client. They're highly individualized, and it's going to be based on the client's needs, but also their right to self-determination, what they want to work on, what they want. However, in general, someone who's been housed in one of Friendship Shelter's permanent supportive housing units is likely to see supportive services in the form of case management, transportation to and from appointments, food banks, care coordination, and assistance with referrals to other community programs and services. Once someone moves in, they're going to be greeted right away by our housing staff and provided with furniture and living essentials. And then they're going to be quickly introduced then to their case managers to start talking about what are your goals? Are you just willing to, get settled in right now, or you want to get started? How can I help you best? And then, for those who are interested, we're going to link them up with our benefits coordinator and start working towards the process of gaining income and going that direction. So because of this approach, our clients have the tools they need to be successful. We also know, though, that leisure is very important. So something we like to do at the Friendship Shelter is plan monthly community meetings or events or groups that the clients can come to and be able to enjoy themselves, but also have this sense of belonging and inclusion that's really important from having a home.
That's great. Thank you so much, Karen. And Shay, you work with a slightly different population. And so I'm curious, from your vantage point, what do support services look like for young adults?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the things Karen said are definitely embedded, but the way we go about it in the service delivery may look different. When you're thinking about young adults, often they have never lived on their own at all. And many of the young adults we're working with, they're coming out of foster care or different types of situations where they may not have had as much autonomy or independence and control. And so it's walking them through every single part, every single step, holding, as much hands as we can to really help them how to hang a shower curtain, that you need 2 layers to the shower curtain most of the time, or that there's a trash can and there's a liner that goes in the trash can. And that sounds really simple, and it's not because they don't know, it's because they haven't had the opportunity to sometimes have a place of their own and understand some of those really basics. They also need a lot of support in what happens if something breaks or something's not working, what kind of processes to follow. So we do a lot of that. We know that in the age range that we're working with, 18 to 24, a lot of their brain development is still happening, which is very different. While they have the rights and responsibilities of everyone else 18 and over, there's still a lot else going on. And so we really look at how we can support them and motivate them in basic needs and basic skills to help support them having a successful first time being on their own generally. And what does that look like? And all of the skills that need to go with that. including employment and financial literacy and all of the other things that, so they can maintain and sustain their housing way beyond when we're there.
That's great. Thanks so much, Shay. I know I moved out of home when I was 18, and I was definitely a little clueless because I had not done any of those things. So it makes perfect sense that these young adults are learning these things for the first time. It's wonderful that your agency is able to help support them in that process. So 2020 has been a challenging year with the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm really curious to learn how has COVID changed the services that you provide, or the way that you provide services? And Karen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, COVID came as quite a shock to our whole team. Many of the residents were really struggling to understand not just the situation, but why their routines needed to be changed. So, case managers were no longer able to spend time sitting in their clients' homes and talking with them in this comfortable place where sometimes, vulnerability is common. So, we had to switch those conversations to either being over the phone or, with masks 6 feet apart in a park, and kind of modeling social distancing and what life looks like now. We've also had to set new rules around transportation, which have been huge. Transportation has been a huge change. We used to transport our clients just about anywhere, and now we can't. So we try to use South Orange County public transit, but that can be a definite challenge at times. So finding ways to get the clients where we need to get them is not always easy. Our staff, though, has been able to get creative by attending our clients' doctor's appointments via video chat or, like a 3-way call. But it's all still a work in progress. It's taken a while, but everyone has been adapting to the new procedures pretty well. But our clients still do ask all the time how soon this is all going to be over. They're eager to get back to normal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It has been a very challenging 8-9 months that we've experienced so far. David, how about for you with Pathways of Hope in the north side of the county?
Yeah, all those things Karen touched on have been have created new challenges and hurdles for our case managers for sure in all of our programs, especially not being able to go into the homes or into even their shelter units and talk to them directly and having to pull people out and then talk to them in more of a open air neutral environments. It's tougher to have sort of one-on-one conversations about potentially private information in that context, but we've been doing the best we can. We're doing a lot of phone in stuff. It's forced us to pivot virtually and do a lot of things that are different, but it's worked out okay. The biggest change we've had has been in food distribution. So when you talk about a supportive service that helps people be able to pay their rent and stay housed, food provisions in the community are really important for that as supplemental services. And we saw essentially overnight during the pandemic go from about doing Monday through Saturday about 30 food distributions a day to households to 150. So it was instantly quintupled, I think that is, right? Quintupled overnight. And we also had to not allow people to walk through our food pantry to pick their own foods, which we had taken a lot of pride in doing because it allowed people to pick things based on their own dietary restrictions, cultural sensitivity, things like that, which was important to us. And it gave a lot of value to the consumer, to the person walking through. They felt like they were valued because we listened to them. And so we had to take that away and do pre-bagged food, which we don't love, but COVID's just changed a lot of those things. And what it's really done too is really driven through the roof the amount of requests we get for rental assistance and stability for housing. When you talk about it, when I was talking about housing first earlier, one of the goals is to keep people housed and not let them come out of housing, and that's why the services are so important. So since this has started with so many big businesses, locally in North Orange County not being allowed to reopen, amusement parks, things like that, the downward pressure that's put on working class people to be able to pay their rent has been tough. Fortunately, we've had great partnerships with the city of Anaheim, city of Fullerton, that's allowed us to do some of that rental assistance. But that's been where the biggest challenges, I think, have been, and where the biggest pressure points have been for needed services.
Thanks, David. Shay, how about you?
Absolutely. Echoing a lot of the things David said, we've seen a 250% increase in the need for groceries. And so we're providing not just for our youth, because they often have families or are part of family units, and providing a week's worth of groceries for them. And the same thing, we've had to change how we do groceries and what that looks like. We also are still providing our hot meals and to-go meals, and that has increased drastically. But the biggest thing we're seeing with the young population that we're in was the switch for online schooling. And so a lot of them were very unprepared to switch to online schooling and continue their online education in this environment. And so we spent a lot of time trying to help support them in purchasing cameras and all of these things we need for Zoom to be able to be successful, or things they need to be able to be comfortable in completing their schoolwork. We also have a lot of youth who come to our parking lot and complete their schooling because they have no other significant access to Wi-Fi. And so we've had to do that and bump up all of our Wi-Fi systems to make sure they can all access it. We've provided laptops and Chromebooks and iPads and whatever we can get our hands on so that they can actually continue their schooling. And we actually saw a record number of our youth complete their semester last semester, which was surprising to us, but we tried everything we could to help them remain. And that included basic needs. We also saw an uptick in housing stability, financial aid being needed. And we also have a state grant where we're able to provide that for transitional age youth. And we saw a huge increase in the need for that. We had all of our youth in our transitional housing. Over 80% of them, their employment was affected, whether hours reduced, lost their job completely. And so they pay a subsidized rent. However, we were able to seek a generous donor who paid their rent for the last 6 months of the pandemic and what's happening. And so we haven't had any youth leave the program during that time.
That's really quite remarkable. And it's so encouraging to hear how each of you at your agencies have pivoted to continue to meet the needs that were already present, and then the growing needs that there are across our community. So I just want to commend all of you for how you've adapted to help just people who are vulnerable in our community, and say thank you. Well, I want to ask kind of a slightly different question around supportive services. What, from each of your vantage points, what's something that people might not necessarily know or think about when they think about supportive services? And I'd love for each of you to just share a story about what this looks like. And so, David, I'll start with you for this one.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to preface this by saying, don't get the wrong idea when I tell this story. We should not be asking homeless people to relocate. They should be able to stay in the community they went homeless in, which by and large, if they are homeless in Orange County, they went homeless in Orange County and they were housed here before, and they should be able to stay here. But one of the things I do like that we've been able to do with some supportive services is family reunification stuff to end homelessness for people and to give people stability. So the ability to broker, so to speak, a conversation between the household that we're working with at Pathways of Hope. Maybe they've just come in off the streets. Maybe it's a single parent with kids, and maybe they're estranged from a parent of theirs that lives in another state or another county. The idea that we could actually facilitate and broker a conversation and then pay for transportation to reunite them, and potentially moving vehicles and things like that. It's a weird sort of abstract way of thinking about supportive services, but when you consider that doing that puts a family back together, reduces that strife that could have caused the homelessness and to begin with, it ends homelessness for that household. I just saw, I saw the city of Fullerton the other day. We had a gentleman that we were all talking about trying to help, who had been living on the streets. We got him, we didn't actually, the city did, but we kind of contributed with some thinking around it. A guy who hadn't seen his father in 30 years and had been homeless for a long time, and his dad was going to let him live with him and end his homelessness permanently. And it just took a bus ticket and some conversation. So it's a weird kind of supportive service. And I only say weird because I definitely think it's not one people think of. But when you consider how the deep impact that can have, especially when there's a lot of traumatic experiences and we're trying to unravel and undo those, and then we get to end homelessness on the practical side, I think it's pretty special. So I really like those kinds of stories. But again, I want to emphasize, we should not be expecting people who are experiencing homelessness to move if they don't want to. But when you can make it happen and make it work, it makes a lot of sense and can be really a beautiful thing too.
That's great. Thank you, David. Shay, how about you?
Absolutely. Many of the young people we work with are kind of just starting out in their careers and finding what works for them. And I can think of a story. We had a young man who had started like a handyman business and was doing pretty well with it. And he had all of his tools and he kept everything in his truck because he would take it with him to go to different places. And unfortunately, his truck was stolen with all of his tools in it. And so that meant his livelihood was gone in an instant, his transportation to and from, as well as everything he did to keep himself employed and functional. And so one of the things we actually did was worked with him on getting his tools replaced and financially supporting him to get his tools replaced. So we could have just paid the rent for a few months, but getting his tools was going to help him really down the road a much longer, and then hopefully investing in a much better security system on his truck so that his tools didn't get stolen again. But really looking at how do we help them maintain their self-esteem, self-agency, and who they are? And that was who he had really built and become and what he was known for. And so supporting him there was supporting him in his housing choice and what that looked like for him.
That's a really great story of creativity around supportive services. Karen, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that, like reconnecting with a long lost loved one or getting a car or scheduling these overdue services are all, or overdue surgery are all supportive services you don't immediately think of right away. Once my clients are housed, I really like to focus on coping skills and how to keep them housed stably. And so what's going to help them manage their day to day. For some of our clients, it's, through communication, you find out that they love animals. And one of my favorite days at work, I got to take a client to the animal shelter, and we picked out a dog and got him all the documentation he needed for an emotional support animal. And it really was rewarding for me, but also for the client to now have something to help them every single day. And I get home at the end of the day, I'm like, guess what I got to do? So that's it's not a supportive service you think of. One thing we've also been doing recently is, because we can't hold our art groups anymore, we will take all the art supplies and drop them off at the clients' houses and say, send us a picture of your creation. We're going to do an art contest, and we'll announce the winner at some point. So it's really just about identifying what that client needs and then figuring out how to make it happen with the resources we have.
That's really great. I love that idea. It really put a smile on my face when you're talking about dropping off art supplies. I know that something that people may not think about, but when somebody's transitioning out of homelessness and into a home of their own, is that actually that can be quite an isolating experience, particularly if you've been in a shelter environment or you've been living out on the streets, where perhaps you have a really strong sense of community and people that have been with you in that and supported you through that. And to move into your own place, it can sometimes be a little frightening and a little isolating. And so I know with COVID, isolation is certainly something that we've been battling with a lot. So it's really great to hear how there's just been this creativity to be able to still provide those moments of connection and community for people. So thank you so much, Karen, for sharing that story. We often have a lot of people asking us how they can volunteer and get involved. And so I would just love for each of you to share, can people get involved? And what's really exciting to me is that we've got South Orange County, we've got North Orange County, we've got Central Orange County represented here. So we'll start up in the north. David, how can people get connected to Pathways of Hope?
Well, at Pathways of Hope, we call ourselves POHOCers because our website is POHOC, so POHOC, POHOC.org. You go to /volunteer, right? So POHOC.org/volunteer. It's got an easy application to fill out, volunteer interest form. You can get involved. Right now, we've been really great. We have an amazing volunteer coordinator, Ann Stoddard, and she does some awesome stuff in terms of creating virtual and remote opportunities for volunteerism, which is just fantastic. We're really excited about that. We also have our food distribution center at the hub. So we're still doing a ton of food every single day. It's not at that 150 number, but it's still a lot every day. It's 50, 60, 75 sometimes food distributions in a single day that we need to prep for and then distribute to the community. So we always need help with that. We also have our 3 college campus sites. So we have food pantries at North Orange Continuing Education, Fullerton College, and Cypress College, and they can always use volunteers as well. They're doing really unique models and drive up food distribution and things like that. And so our service navigators at each site can always use that help. But yeah, plenty of opportunities to still get involved. Despite COVID, we've done a great job being creative and flexible, and our volunteers have been great. Special shout out to the most important volunteers, maybe not most important, but really important volunteers. Our board of directors have been awesome through all this too. And volunteers are the lifeblood of any great organization, and we embrace them in that way, and really strongly encourage anyone who wants to have a really great volunteer opportunity in North Orange County to hit us up, because I think you will find it rewarding, well organized, easy to do, and a lot of fun. So thanks.
That's great. Thank you, David. We'll head to Central. We'll work our way down Orange County. So Shay, how about you?
Absolutely. So for us, we also on our website, orangewoodfoundation.org/volunteer, you can find ways to get involved. We have a volunteer coordinator, Humberto Rojas, who is great at plugging you in with something that you're interested in and finding what works. A couple of the opportunities we do have is we actually have mentorship. So if you're interested in partnering up with a young adult and helping them navigate those first few steps on their own in life, that's something that you could do. We also have kitchen volunteers and people who get involved in helping with our grocery distribution, as well as preparing hot meals or organizing hot meals for our youth to go out. We also have other opportunities, especially during the holidays. I myself, as well as a lot of my other fun colleagues from Cal State Long Beach, have been volunteering for the past couple of years to do Thanksgiving dinner at Orangewood Foundation. So we are doing that this year, as well as Christmas. A lot of places aren't able to do that this year, and we're going to do it outside and the true Thanksgiving style outside. But we're going to be serving a Thanksgiving meal and distributing meals that day, because that's important for our youth to have a family and a place. And so throughout the holidays, we also have a holiday gift drive. And so we have Amazon wish lists, and people can support us there, or they can help us on site organizing those gifts and getting them out to our youth. A lot of the gifts are housewares and things that they need to be able to be sustainable in their own places. So those are just a few other ways to help.
That's great. Thanks so much. We will head further south. Karen.
friendshipshelter.org is really going to be the best place to look for any volunteer and job opportunities with the Friendship Shelter. That we have, a couple different programs, so you can always find something that you will enjoy. But I'll say I have the best time every single day at work, so it's really a great place to work and volunteer, and we appreciate everyone who comes in and helps us out, and it's great.
Thanks so much, Karen. And we are almost at time, and so I want to thank each of our guests for coming on today and participating in this community chat. It has been a joy to talk with each of you. And again, I just want to commend you on the ongoing work that your organizations have done here in our community to help keep people housed, to continue to help people move into permanent housing, and also to help just in this unprecedented crisis, the ways that you have adapted and been flexible to continue your incredibly important work. So this does bring us to the end of our first Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week community chat. We will be back tomorrow, same time, talking about homelessness prevention. And so again, thank you, Karen, thank you, Shay, thank you, David, and thank you to everybody who joined in, and thank you to everybody who sent questions to help us formulate such a great conversation. This chat will be available on Facebook and YouTube if you want to pass it on to any of your friends who might not have been able to tune in live. And thank you again, and we'll see you soon.